Hey everybody, today we're learning one of my favorite songs of all time, Pink Moon by Nick Drake. One reason for the unique sound of this song is that it was played in a pretty drastic alternate tuning, which allowed him to play chords that you can't play in standard tuning. So in this lesson, we're going to learn that tuning and we're going to learn exactly how to play the song as it sounds on the recording. However, there is a dark side to using alternate tunings, and that is unless you have a separate guitar that you can leave in that tuning, you're going to have to retune your guitar every single time you want to play the song. Then you're going to have to retune it back to standard tuning whenever you want to play anything else, which is a huge pain. So in part 2 of this lesson, we're going to do a full analysis of the chords he's playing to see if there's a way to play a version of the song in standard tuning. But for now, let's get our guitars retuned. The tuning is from low to high, C, G, C, F, C, E. So if you're coming from standard tuning, your low E string is going to be tuned down 2 whole steps. Your A, D, and G strings are each going to be tuned down 1 step. Your B string is going to be tuned up a half step, and your high E string stays where it is. After you retune your strings, make sure you go through and check them again a couple times because strings tend to creep back to their normal tunings within the first few minutes of being retuned. After you add a capo on the 2nd fret, retune your strings again because capos tend to pull strings sharp. And just a reminder, when you have the capo on, each string is going to be a whole step higher than it was when you tune the open string. So your capo tuning is going to be D, A, D, G, D, F sharp. A few quick notes before we start. First, the strumming patterns in this lesson are approximations because Nick Drake was not somebody who played the same thing exactly the same way twice. So I've simplified some of the strumming patterns and I've chosen patterns that accurately capture the feel of each section. And speaking of strumming, this song is in swing feel. So you're not going to have totally even, steady eighth notes like you do in straight feel. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You're going to have slightly staggered swing eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One of the great things about Nick Drake's guitar playing, in my opinion, was his extremely dynamic right hand, meaning he would vary volume and the number of strings he was hitting from one strum to the next. And we're going to cover some of those details in this lesson. We're not going to cover all of them because if we did, we'd be here for hours, but just keep in mind, if that level of detail feels overwhelming for you, feel free to ignore that stuff and just strum as normal. Just think about the downs and ups and call it good. The song will still sound just fine that way. Okay, so we're going to go over each section of the song individually, but make sure you stick around to the end of the video because that's where I'm going to show you how to put everything together to form the entire song. And if you want the full tab, there's a link in the description. Our first section is what I'm calling the theme, which functions as an intro, a pre-chorus, and an outro. So the term theme is just kind of a catch-all term that I'm using for this section. The strumming pattern for the first measure of the theme is down, down, up, up, down. And there's a left hand thing happening in there too. Right after the first strum, we're doing a hammer-on onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. I'm calling it the 3rd string instead of the G string because it is no longer tuned to a G. So I'm going to be referring to the strings by their number names in this lesson rather than their letter names. We want to do that hammer on with our 2nd finger because of what happens in the next measure. But for now, just hear that first measure played all the way through. So down, hammer, down, up, down. The second measure, the strumming pattern is very straightforward. It's just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, strumming on every single count. But there's a lot more left hand movement in the second measure. So we're starting the second measure with our 2nd finger still here on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. But on the first up strum, we're going to jump over with our 1st finger to the 2nd fret of the 4th string. And then we're going to jump over to the 2nd fret of the 5th string and then the 2nd fret of the 6th string. So it's this cool little walk down that he does. And it looks like this. Down, jump, lift, jump, lift, jump, lift. So one more time, we're starting here on our 2nd fret of the 3rd string with our 1st strum, down, and then we're going to jump to the 4th string on the up strum, and then lift on this down strum, and then to the 5th string on the up strum, and then lift on the next down strum, and then to the 6th string for the next 2 strums. And then finally on the last strum of the measure, we lift again. So I'm going to play through that one more time with counting. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So both of those measures together sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One more time. Down, hammer, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. The transition is the exact same thing as the theme, but with a lot less left-hand movement in the 2nd measure. So the 1st measure of the transition, exactly the same as the 1st measure of the theme. 2nd measure of the transition, you're just actually holding that initial chord where your 2nd finger is on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. You hold that for the entire measure until the 4 count, so until the last 2 strums. So that 2nd measure of the transition just looks like this. Down, up, down, up, down, up, lift, up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's talk about strumming dynamics. I mentioned earlier that Nick Drake had a very dynamic right hand, and there is a lot of that going on in this section. There is only one strum that he's consistently strumming all 6 strings on in this section, and that is the and of 2 in the 1st measure. 1 and 2 and. And there's only one other strum where he's consistently strumming even 5 strings, and that is the and of 1 in the 2nd measure. Sorry. There it is. Gets that 2nd string in there. For all the other strums that he's doing in this section, he's pretty much just staying on the lowest 4 strings. So put that together, it sounds something like this. You hear how that high E string, the 1st string, just jumps out on the and of 2, and then the 2nd string just jumps out on the and of 1 of the 2nd measure. One more time. The other thing to think about in terms of dynamics when you're strumming this section is the down strums in between these hopping notes on the 2nd measure are very quiet. He's just kind of brushing the strings. For the verse, we start out with a bar on the 7th fret, which is actually the 9th fret, but I'm calling it the 7th fret because it's 7 frets higher than my capo. And we have our 3rd finger on the 9th fret, quote unquote 9th fret of the 3rd string. So that's our 1st chord shape. And then our 2nd chord shape is almost the same thing. We just move our 3rd finger down to the 2nd string. And those are the only 2 chord shapes in the verse. This and this. We go back and forth a few times between those 2 chord shapes, and then we slide everything down to the 5th fret and do the entire same sequence, but down here. Then we come back to the 7th fret, and back to the 5th fret one more time, and that's the entire verse. So let's go through the strumming pattern. First measure of the verse, we're up here on barring the 7th fret, and we have down, down, up, down, up, down. Now notice I changed to the 2nd chord shape on that last strum, and notice also that on the strum before that, I lifted up this finger. You're going to do that every single time you change between these two chord shapes. On the last strum of your current chord, you're going to pick up your 3rd finger so that you can land it on the next chord in time. So one more time for that first measure. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Second measure, we're here on our 2nd chord shape now. Down, up, down, up, down, down, up. And I'm lifting my 3rd finger up on that last strum because I'm going to go back to my 1st chord shape on the 3rd measure. One more time for the 2nd measure. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and. So those first 2 measures together, we have down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up. 3rd measure is almost the same as the 1st measure, but we add 1 extra strum at the very end of the measure. So that is down, down, up, down, up, down, up. That's it. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. That and gets added. And then the 4th measure is we skip the 1 count. We don't strum anything on the 1 count of the 4th measure, so it's kind of hard to demonstrate just the 4th measure by itself. Instead, I'm going to play the 3rd and 4th measures together so you can hear how those flow together. So again, 3rd and 4th measure, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, up. So I'm lifting up all my fingers, lifting up the bar on those last 3 strums so that I can get down here to my 5th fret bar. So one more time, 3 and 4 together. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 3, and 4, and. So all 4 of those measures together, we have down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, up. And that is our sequence. Like I said, we're going to then move the bar down 2 frets to the 5th fret, and we're going to do the exact same thing one more time, same strumming pattern and everything, down here on the 5th fret. And that is half of the verse. Then we just repeat both of those positions one more time, and that's a full verse. So I'm going to play through just that first half of the verse. So 1 7th fret sequence and 1 5th fret sequence. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. Down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. In the chorus, we get a couple more new chords, the first one being this one. Just 2nd fret of the 6th, 5th, and 4th strings all together, and he's still not really hitting that high 1st string all that much. I have my fingers arranged like this: 2nd finger, 1st finger, 3rd finger. However you can get your fingers to play all 3 of those notes is totally fine. It's basically the same thing as an A major shape, but a couple strings down. Our 2nd chord shape is just holding down, just fretting the 2nd fret of the 5th string. And again, strumming all the strings, but not really hitting that high E string all that much, that 1st string. So those are our 2 new chord shapes. And the overall structure of the chorus, he actually recycles the theme and the transition and uses them in the chorus as well. So we have first chord for a few measures, second chord for a couple strums, and then one theme, one transition. And then we go back to the first chord for a few measures, back to the second chord for one measure, and then the transition. So that's kind of the structure, the form of the chorus. The strumming pattern for the first measure of the chorus is actually the same exact strumming pattern that we saw in the first measure of the verse. We have down, down, up, down, up, down. Nothing going on in the left hand here though. We're set on this pattern for a few measures here. So it's a little bit more straightforward than the first in that sense. So down, down, up, down, up, down. And then the second measure is down, up, down, down, up, down, up. So those two measures together, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and the third measure, we're strumming every single count, still holding on to this first chord shape, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and the fourth measure, we're strumming on almost every count, but there's a switch to the second chord shape that happens in the middle of this measure, and it happens with a hammer-on, similar to the way that we started out the song with a hammer-on the second fret of the third string, except for this time it's a hammer-on the second fret of the fifth string. So that fourth measure looks like this. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and so down, up, down, up, down, hammer, down, up. So on 3, we're actually playing all open strings and then hammering on the and of 3, and then we got 4 and on this chord. Then we go back to the theme, which you already know, one time, and then we go back to the transition, which you already know, for one time. Then we're back to the first chord, same exact strumming pattern for the first two measures as we did the first time. So down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. And now for the third measure, this is where it kind of varies, kind of differs from the first time we did it. Third measure is down, up, down, up, down, up, hammer on that second chord. So 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So we lift our fingers on the 4 and we hammer on the and of 4. And then we have one measure where we're holding this second chord and strumming on every count. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So those together one more time. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and then we do the transition, and that's the end of the chorus. The bridge is where the piano melody comes in, which is harmonized by the guitar. So we're going to start. Here's our first chord, and again, he's not really hitting this first string all that much. So we have our fourth finger on the 7th fret, capo version of the 7th fret of the third string. We're just going to walk through the notes that you're playing before we get to the strumming pattern. And then you're going to slide down 1 fret, 6th fret, same string, 4th fret, 2nd fret, open, and then you are going to do a hammer-on into the first chorus chord. This guy, remember him? So one more time. 7, slide to 6, 4, 2, open, hammer on into the first chorus chord. And then the second half of the melody is starting on the 5th fret of the 5th string, again with our 4th finger. 4th fret, 2nd fret, all open, and then a quick on the 6th string, 5th fret, 4th fret, open, and then we play the transition. And then we repeat that whole sequence, and that's the bridge. So one more time, let's walk through just the left-hand part of it. 3rd string, 7th fret, 6th, 4th, 2nd, open, chorus chord. We actually have a couple strums of open strings before we start this second half of the melody. Now we're on the 5th string, 5th fret, 4th fret, 2nd fret, open, and then a quick 6th string, 5, 4, open, into the transition. Now let's talk about the strumming. So we have on the first measure, same old familiar strumming pattern that we saw in the first measure of the verse and in the first measure of the chorus. Down, down, up, down, up, down. So we're sliding down to the 6th fret on that last down strum of the first measure. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And then we're just going to be switching notes as we do the next couple up strums. So it's going to sound like down, down, up, down, down, up, and then up, down, up. So that's kind of the first little sequence there. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, and 4, and hammer. So when you get to this chorus chord, it's open, hammer, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So you pick up your fingers on that 4 and so that you can get set for the second half of the melody. So that whole sequence one more time. Down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, hammer, down, up, down, 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 up. And now we're to the second half of the melody. Basically the same rhythm, but with a few extra strums. You don't skip those down strums in the second measure of this half like you did in the first half. So this looks like down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, into the transition. So one more time, that's a little bit tricky. You're still changing notes on the same count, still changing on the up strums. You're just not skipping the down strums in between those note changes like you do in the first half. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So that is the first half of the bridge, and then you just repeat that one more time, and that's the whole bridge. And that's pretty much the whole song. The only thing left to show you is the very last strum that he does, which is actually the exact same as the very first strum that he does. Open strings, followed by a hammer onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So that's how he ends the song. I'm going to show you how to put all that stuff together into the entire song in just a second. But real quick, before we do that, if you guys have found this video helpful so far, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me create more videos like this. And if you have any requests for other songs that you want me to do, leave those in the comments. So you now know all the sections of the song. You just need to know how to put them together in order to actually play the entire song. So here goes. You start out with the theme 3 times, followed by a transition and then the verse. Then you do the theme one more time, followed by the transition and a chorus. Then you do the bridge, one more verse, the theme 3 more times, and the ending, which is just this one strum of this one chord. Now, I know it's hard to get a big picture of the overall song when you're watching a video like this, where we're going through each individual section one at a time. So again, if you guys want the full tab, there's a link in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and remember, that's how to play Pink Moon if you want to sound as close as possible to the recording. In part 2 of this lesson, we're going to analyze all the chords that he's playing and see if there's a way we can play a version of the song in standard tuning so that we don't have to constantly be switching back and forth between standard tuning and this alternate tuning. So make sure and check that out.